wonderful, wonderful group. I'm going to paraphrase here, and I hope I'm not overstepping, but they perform what I believe to be the top 40 from 1776. All right? But Ann and the group will certainly discuss what's going on, and much better than I will. So if you would please put your hands together and welcome the musicians of Malwick.
Well, thank you so much for coming. What a great library series where they serve wine. I'm Anne-Marie Barker-Schwartz, and I'm the Director of Musicians of Malwick. To give you a little bit of background, we are in residence since our very first concert at the Schuyler Mansion, New York State Historic Site in Albany, the 1761 home of General Philip Schuyler, and newly famous, I guess, because of his association with his son-in-law, Alexander Hamilton, who was married in the house. We're also at SUNY Schenectady, where we also teach, and Sten, our guitarist, who you've seen in a different band down here. He also plays with the Railroad Boys, but he runs the audio recording program at our college, and Andre is the cello teacher, and Norm is the flute teacher, and I teach violin and viola and run the chamber music program. So we're delighted to be here. It was a beautiful drive down today. I've never been to Millbrook before, but what a lovely place. And we have some lovely music to go with your lovely place. Of course, because of the year being 2026, we are performing music, as Bob said, sort of a 1776 top 40. And it's both highbrow music, including music of Handel and Scarlatti and Stamitz, but it's also a little bit more, as Norm likes to say, mid-brow or low-brow music that was heard in the taverns. And I think it's a fun juxtaposition because the music in America at that time was very much this combination of more serious music and music that was a little bit more meant to dance to and tap your feet to. And one of the weird paradoxes of music of this period in America is that even though we were at war with the British, we could not get enough of their culture. So whatever was being played in London at the time was being played here as well. And we were buying music from shops that were London-based. We were listening to musicians who were itinerant, who had traveled over from England and also from the continent. They were usually musicians who kind of at the end of their careers back there, but were looking to reawaken their musical careers here. And they would tour up and down the eastern seaboard, performing what was ever popular in London at the time here as well. So we're going to begin today with music of Handel. Handel has never gone out of vogue. He's one of the few composers that from his lifetime until now has constantly been in the musical canon. And with good reason, this wonderful music. I will let Norm tell you a little bit about the first piece, which is a flute sonata, and I get to sit down and enjoy this with you guys as well.
Welcome to the Handel Flute Sonata mixtape. What I decided to do was mix and match movements from two different sonatas. But there's actually a precedent for that. In that, for one thing, Handel, like many Baroque composers, wrote flute sonatas early in his career. The flute was a popular instrument, something you could make music with in your home, and so it was a good item to have available for sale to get yourself known as a composer. So then he went to London to visit the king, visit the queen, etc. like that, and became famous. And his sonatas continued to be published in Germany, sometimes new sonatas appearing without the benefit of Handel's help. Let's rearrange sonatas, movements from previously published sonatas because, you know, it's good for business as Handel was getting more and more famous. But Handel was doing that himself because there's movements from some of the flute sonatas that show up in another sonata. It just happens to be in the key that fits that sonata, and there's movements that get imported from one instrument sonata to another, but then he never objected to reusing good music of his, if he was either, let's say, short on time, facing a deadline, or if he just thought, well, this is a tune that fits here, and it's a good piece, I'm going to use it again. So, even with another movement from this B minor sonata that I had, two open and close with a movement from the B minor sonata, easy to do because it's like 6 movements, it's like a suite, and then one from the G major in between.
But I could point out that the movement from the G major sonata is actually in the same sonata with that first movement of the B minor sonata in my Amsterdam edition.
Aha, there we go, see? So, yeah, in the B minor sonata, there's a movement that goes something like this. In fact, it's such watery music that when it goes to the second half, it's in D major. Like that, because if it's a good tune, keep writing it as long as it's working, as long as it's good. So, there we go.
So we're going to turn now to music of Domenico Scarlatti. Scarlatti was, of course, an Italian composer, son of Alessandro Scarlatti, very important musical family in Italy. Scarlatti wrote more than 500 keyboard sonatas, among other things, lots of sacred music too. In 1720, he traveled to London to supervise a production of his opera Narcissus. And that's, of course, how he sort of got introduced to the London audiences, which translates later to music coming to America. I'll let Stan talk about it because he's playing a guitar transcription of two of the sonatas.
So these two sonatas are very popular amongst guitarists because they fit so well, moving them from keyboard to guitar. So it's nothing new that I arranged them, but these are my arrangements of these two sonatas.
authentic to this time period in America, where you wouldn't be seeing, say, a symphony orchestra or a large group of instruments, but rather a smaller group of instrumentalists performing various sized pieces, which is exactly what we're doing for you today. So our next composer is Anton Stamitz. And Stamitz was from one of the great German musical families. His father was Johann Stamitz, who was the founder of the Mannheim School of Music. And that's where all the important musical innovations were happening in the 1740s and 1750s. I know by today's standards it probably doesn't sound like much, but at the time everybody was visiting Mannheim to see what they were doing there. And Johann Stamitz had two sons, Karl and Anton. He died in 1757, so Karl at the time was 7 years old and Anton was only, I think, 3 or 4. And they were trained in by other musicians in the Mannheim Orchestra, established themselves as violinists and composers, toured a bit, ended up in Paris by 1770, where they pretty much established themselves for the rest of their lives. Karl was a little bit more famous than Anton, and so he did some more touring, going to London and touring throughout the continent, but Anton stayed in France. In fact, he stayed in France through the Revolution, and we don't really know where he died or when he died. He just kind of went off, off grid, sort of. But in 1778, Mozart visits Paris with his mother, and he writes back to his father on July 9th of that year, of the two Stamitz brothers, only the younger one is here. The elder, the real composer, is in London. They are indeed two wretched scribblers, gamblers, swillers, and adulterers, not the kind of people for me. The one who is here has scarcely a decent coat on his back. Nonetheless, Anton left a lot of music, and it's quite good music, actually, despite Mozart's comments. And we know that when Jefferson traveled to be ambassador in France in the 1780s, that he went to hear concerts both at the Concert Spirituel, which is one of the places the brothers were playing, and also at Versailles. So he certainly knew the Stamitz brothers, and that gives also this nice tie to America. We're playing a duet from the third notebook of violin and cello duets. This is kind of an interesting time period for the cello because it's transitional. It's going from an instrument that predominantly supported the bass line to having its own sort of music that was much more difficult. And certainly this particular duet exploits that. It's not easy. The cello is as active, in some ways maybe more active than the violin. It's in 2 movements, a slower first movement, andante, and then a rondo for the second movement.
Yes.
I'm going to tune too.
Okay, you do that.
If this is cold, it's impossible.
Not bad for a wretched scribbler, right? So we turn now to new music that celebrates old music. Musicians of Malwick has a long-standing collaboration with a young composer whose name is Max Kaplan. We first met him when we played his senior college recital back in 2015 at Union College in Schenectady. And it was obvious he was really quite a talent. And so from that time in 2015, we have commissioned 8 pieces from Max. And the one we're playing today is the latest of those commissions. It's based on a fuguing tune by Louis Edson. Louis Edson was a blacksmith and a composer who was based in Woodstock, New York. This tune was written sometime in the 1770s. Some of his tunes, by the way, are still in hymnals today that are sung. So it's kind of a nice tie into this region and this music that is from so long ago but is still in use today. When I made this commission for Max, I wanted to commemorate some people who had been very important to musicians of Malwick who have passed away. So there's a theme, 3 variations, and a finale. And each one of these movements commemorates someone that musically sort of helped make musicians of Malwick what it was. From a teacher I had in grad school that actually gave me the book where I found the fuguing tune, to a man named William Kerrigan, who was the head of the Bruckner Society and made many transcriptions for musicians of Malwick. Because we're a little out of our usual local area, you won't know any of these people, but I'll tell you, they were all wonderful.
Oh, should I account for the range of hardware? Max, I'm kind of a flute gearhead, and not content with just flute and piccolo. And Max appreciates that and has involved in some of his pieces. Some of the other members of the flute family are probably used to the piccolo, sort of the sawed-off shotgun or derringer of the flute family. And then it's half the length of the concert flute. So, as it must acoustically, it plays an octave higher. But if you have a flute that's about 1 1/3 the length of the concert flute, you get a flute that plays in the key of G. And this is the alto flute, and this is in candy cane form, curved head joint. It's also played quite frequently with completely straight setup, straight head joint. But I like the ergonomic comfort of playing the curved head. Well, it's got a nice little velvety thing going on. Oh, and this has 3.5 flutes, this piece, because the shakuhachi, I don't have a shakuhachi to play, but the shakuhachi sound, that if any of you know that Japanese traditional flute, is referred to in one of the variations. It'll be easy to tell because I'll be suddenly playing with a very breathy sound like your teacher usually tells you never to do. But the shakuhachi is played. And blown, and that's why it gets that kind of interesting breathy sound. Also a clear sound too, but I'll be playing it in a normal setup, but imitating shakuhachi when that arrives. Okay.
there. Speaking of Scottish influence, there's so much about the American Revolution that has to do with Scottish people and Scottish people actually in the Hudson Valley. And we have a Scottish set next, beginning with music for solo flute, and then a set of variations with flute and cello, and a solo guitar piece, and then a really fun piece from a curious collection of Scottish tunes.
So, anyone ever been to Roslin Castle, the ruins of that in Scotland? It's a real castle.
Somebody's
You
been.
have? Oh my goodness! What was it like? I've just seen pictures of it.
Very old.
Yes. And so it's somewhat in ruins, right? But it's still there. So anyway, there's a tune named after the castle, and it was a subject for elaboration by the great flutist Charles Nicholson, who was a flutist in the early 1800s in England. And I consider him the Elvis Presley of the flute because it is said that the ladies would faint in the aisles when he performed. And this is my rendering of an arrangement he did of Roslin Castle. So if you're feeling a little faint, at least the chairs are very close together and there's carpet and floor. I'll try to make it sound good, but I won't try to make anyone faint. And this is going to be a debut. You've heard a premiere, now you're hearing a debut as well, because I played this on a couple of different flutes, but never on my alto flute before, and I decided today that it's an excellent mood for it. So Nicholson, what he could do, he made his own flutes, and he had like very truck driver hands, even though there were no trucks to be had at the time. And since he had like very large fingertips, very broad, he could carve the tone holes of the flute bigger than anybody else's flute, which makes for a louder sound. And the great flutist and inventor Theobald Bohm came to Britain to find out what was going on with Nicholson and his Elvis magic. And he sat amazed and wondered, like, what am I going to do with my spindly little silversmith hands? He had been trained as a silversmith. That's one of the reasons he made flutes in silver. So he figured, like, oh, well, because I'm making it in silver, I can make a very large tone hole and just cover it with a very large key and have a flute as loud as Mr. Nicholson's. And so that's what he did. So here we go.
I gotta shut this thing off. I don't know how to shut it off.
Oh, what do you know? It's in G major. There we go. That's the prelude to Roslin Castle. the Burn Davy. And with Scottish songs, it's good to get a little primer, maybe word by word even simply, in Scots English. English Scottish. And so a burn in this case is a brook or a creek. And Down the Burn Davy is described in the poem as the most handsome lad in the locality, and Mary as not only uncommonly pretty, but at age 15, ready to be a bride. That was then. 18 is the new 15. And when the perennial question arises of just how two young people interested in each other can manage to have a private conversation, one solution is outlined in this poem and song. When trees did bud and fields were green and brilliant yellow flowers bloomed, when Mary was complete 15 and love laughed in her eyes, live Davy's blinks her hearts did move, to speak her mind thus free. Go down the stream, Davy, love, and I will follow you. As down the stream they took their way, and through the flowery dale, his cheek to hers he often laid, and love was always the tale. Mary, when shall we return, this pleasure to renew? Quoth Mary, love, I like this stream, and always will follow you.
to a Scottish solo guitar work, which I'll let Sten introduce as he gets back.
This is called Jacques Hazeldine. This is an arrangement of the Scottish air by Martin Simpson. He's a steel string folk singer, finger picker, and any guitarist here may have heard of him. He's wonderful. I met him when I was in Ithaca 30 years ago, and a little insider baseball. I use fake nails. I use, these are gels. Some people use acrylic nails. When I was in Ithaca 30 years ago, I used ping pong balls. We would glue ping pong balls so we could have picks on our fingers. And I met Martin Simpson, and he was the first person I ever met that was using fake acrylic nails that like just come out at that point. So not only did I learn this arrangement from him, he changed my technique because I started using fake nails then. Never stopped since.
James Oswald was a famous Scottish composer who ended up being head of chamber music for King George III. You know, we kind of reviled King George III here, but he was actually, in terms of the English arts and sciences, a great innovator and a great supporter. So Oswald lived most of his life after he established himself as a musician in London, but he still carried his Scots roots. And so he published all these collection of Scottish songs, putting them in a sort of classical guise, sort of upping the ante a little bit. And he called them the Curious Collection of Scots Tunes. So from that curious collection, we are going to play Hit Her on the Bum. Of the program, which is, we've already gotten into our mid-brow music. So we have first Ground by Mr. Gottfried Finger, which was published in the early 1700s. Does anybody know what a ground is? So a ground is a bass line that repeats over and over and over again. And what's creative about it is what's happening on the top of it. So composers would write what they call divisions, and they would get more and more complex and virtuosic. So you can listen in the finger for that. And we'll go straight from that ground into a set of hornpipes.
The ground is a mid-brow passacato.